Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're embarking on a deep dive into a profoundly critical and frankly uncompromising piece of writing. The source material before us is an autopsy titled The Bullet and the Bully, an autopsy of Charlie Kirk.
Right.
It's important to remember that our mission here is to explore this specific author's unique perspective on Charlie Kirk's life, his controversial rhetoric, and the complex narrative surrounding his death, as described within this text.
Exactly. We're looking at their arguments.
Yeah, we're here to unpack their arguments and interpretations, not to endorse or refute them, just to understand the viewpoint presented.
And what's immediately striking, I think, is the author's deliberate choice to plunge directly into the subject. There's this intense, unwavering viewpoint right from the start.
No easing in.
No, not at all. From the very first lines, this text establishes a tone that is, well, both analytical and deeply personal. It's almost like a rhetorical strategy. It effectively tells the reader, this is how I see it. And it frames everything that follows through that very specific lens. The author aims to dissect not just a person, but the political culture they believe he represented and significantly influenced.
Okay, so the author doesn't shy away from expressing a very immediate, almost visceral reaction to the news of Charlie Kirk's murder.
Not in the slightest.
Right out of the gate, the source explicitly states, and I'm quoting here, "The assassination of Charlie Kirk won't get any tears, any sympathy out of me."
Wow.
And the author then recalls a previous, pretty powerful sentiment. "I've never wished a man dead, but I have read some obituaries with great pleasure."
That's quite a statement to open with.
It really is. It's not just a casual comment. The author is presenting this profound and unapologetic lack of sympathy. So what do you think the author gains by starting like that, with such a confrontational personal opinion instead of maybe a more detached analysis?
That's a really good question, and I think it gets right to the heart of the author's approach here. By beginning with such a, well, provocative and personal declaration, the author immediately signals to the reader, look, this is not going to be a neutral obituary or some kind of balanced biography. It feels like a very deliberate choice.
Designed to do what exactly?
Designed to dismantle any potential for, whitewashing Kirk's legacy from the very outset. It establishes the author's deeply critical stance right away.
Sets the stage.
Yeah, it sets the stage for a critical examination, definitely not a eulogy, and it challenges you, the reader, to grapple with the author's perspective immediately.
And the author doesn't stop there in their characterization. They draw a really strong comparison, stating that Kirk reminded them of Pim Fortuyn, alleging that both men are fused by their supreme hate-mongering.
Strong words.
Very.
Yeah.
And that they made careers on what the author describes as coattails of hate, white entitled, puerile religious, Aryan Nazi-styled hate. They even provocatively label them our Taliban.
It's incredibly charged language.
Absolutely. And as for Kirk personally, the author categorizes him as dead bottom, the dregs, the last one anyone should care an iota about, among the, estimated 150,000 people who die daily.
The author is really employing incredibly strong, very specific language here. It's all meant to articulate their profound contempt for Kirk's public persona and his impact as they see it.
So the comparisons are key.
Definitely. The comparison to Pim Fortuyn, who was a controversial Dutch politician known for anti-immigrant rhetoric, and then using terms like Aryan Nazi-styled hate and our Taliban. These are all meant to unequivocally position Kirk within a lineage of what the author perceives as extreme divisive figures.
It's immediate definition.
Exactly. This immediate, direct, and frankly inflammatory language underscores the author's deeply critical stance. It serves as the kind of thesis for their entire autopsy of Kirk. It's about immediately defining Kirk from this author's perspective, not just as a political figure, but as a symbol of a certain kind of political toxicity.
Okay, so we've established the author's really intense initial reaction. Now, the source moves on to provide a stark illustration of the rhetoric it attributes to Charlie Kirk.
Right, backing up the claims?
Exactly, backing its claims with direct quotes. These aren't just summaries. The author uses precise statements to paint a picture of Kirk's public pronouncements across a whole range of contentious topics.
Let's get into those.
Okay, let's start with social and moral issues. The author quotes Kirk as saying, "Stoning gay people is God's perfect law." And then, when asked about comparing abortion to the Holocaust, Kirk is quoted, "Absolutely I am. In fact, it's worse. It's worse."
So direct comparisons there.
Yes. And the author also includes this statement attributed to him on gender roles. Reject feminism. Submit to your husband, Taylor. You're not in charge.
What the author is doing here, it seems, is systematically presenting Kirk's rhetoric as consistently provocative and, well, extremist on these foundational social and moral questions.
Not just opinions, but arguments for something specific.
Yes, these statements, as presented, they aren't just opinions. They're framed as arguments for highly specific, traditionalist, and often punitive interpretations of social norms. The direct quotes are absolutely crucial for the author's argument.
As evidence.
As undeniable evidence from their perspective of Kirk's public stance and the, inflammatory nature of his positions.
And these statements on social issues are just the beginning. The author then turns to what they present as Kirk's equally incendiary remarks on race and civil rights.
Okay.
The source highlights comments on black pilots, quoting Kirk. If I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified.
Right, I remember seeing reports about that quote.
And concerning foundational figures in legislation, the author attributes these statements to him. MLK was awful. He's not a good person. He said one good thing he actually didn't believe.
Wow, attacking MLK directly.
And also, we made a huge mistake when we passed the Civil Rights Act in the 1960s. The author clearly aims to showcase a willingness, on Kirk's part, to challenge widely accepted historical narratives and undermine figures central to civil rights.
What's revealed through these quotes, again from the author's vantage point, is this consistent pattern of rhetoric. Rhetoric that seeks to question and maybe even dismantle established civil rights gains and figures.
Like the pilot comment.
Yeah, the remark about black pilots in particular suggests the author believes Kirk was perpetuating racial stereotypes. And criticizing Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Act, as the source alleges Kirk did, that directly challenges the widely accepted narrative of American progress and equality.
So the author's point is?
The author's intent here seems to be demonstrating Kirk's willingness to cross what many consider fundamental lines of social decorum and historical consensus. They're using these statements as further proof, in their view, of his divisive nature.
Okay, then the author moves to geopolitics and immigration. Here, the statements attributed to Kirk become, well, even more specific and, in the author's view, extreme.
Gotcha.
On the conflict between Israel and Palestine, Kirk is quoted, Hamas uses the kids as human shields on their bases. That's why Israel is killing them. Israel changed me.
A very definitive stance.
Yes, and the source adds its own observation here, claiming that Kirk was aligning with AIPAC, that's the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, and alleging he received millions and millions of dollars to laud their genocide and that Israel can never be wrong because they are chosen.
So the author is bringing in alleged motivations there, financial ones.
Right, and then there's a statement that the author presents as basically erasing an entire people. Palestine, I don't think the place exists.
The author is arguing here that Kirk adopted this uncritical stance on Israel. And crucially, the author attributes this stance to financial incentives from lobbying groups like AIPAC.
That's a serious claim.
It is. The claim of lauding their genocide is an incredibly serious accusation from the author, highlighting their perception of Kirk's absolute loyalty, as they see it, to one side of a highly contentious conflict.
And the Palestine comment.
That statement, Palestine, I don't think the place exists, as the source presents it, is particularly provocative. It's intended, I think, to illustrate Kirk's alleged dismissal of an entire people's identity and historical claims, further solidifying the author's portrayal of him as a figure of extreme bias.
Then on population and immigration, the author quotes Kirk referencing what's known as the Great Replacement Theory.
Ah, yes.
But phrasing it as a Great Replacement reality. Kirk is quoted directly. It's not a Great Replacement Theory, it's a Great Replacement reality.
So embracing it fully.
Seems so. He continues, just this year, 3.6 million foreigners will invade America. 10-15 million will enter by the end of Joe Biden's term. Each will probably have 3 to 5 kids on average, while native-born Americans have 1.5 per couple. You are being replaced by design.
That's textbook Great Replacement rhetoric presented there.
And finally, on gun violence, a particularly sensitive topic, the source quotes Kirk justifying gun deaths for Second Amendment rights. It's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so that we can have the Second Amendment.
And the author connects this too.
The author specifically mentions his comments about the Sandy Hook parents, attributing to Kirk the sentiment, I think it's worth it.
These passages, taken together, really solidify the author's argument that Kirk systematically employed inflammatory language just across a whole spectrum of deeply sensitive issues.
Right.
The Great Replacement Reality Statement is presented as a direct embrace of the highly controversial, nativist conspiracy theory. The author presents that as a key element of Kirk's appeal.
And the gun comments. By highlighting Kirk's purported justification for gun deaths, even as they claim in the context of tragedies like Sandy Hook, the author is attempting to illustrate what they see as a profound disregard for human life in favor of an absolute interpretation of the Second Amendment.
So the overall point about these quotes, the core insight the author offers, is that these are not isolated remarks. They're presented as part of a deliberate and calculated strategy, using incendiary language to drive engagement, provoke strong reactions. All integral, the author argues, to the persona and platform Kirk built.
Okay, so we've seen the author lay out these undeniably provocative statements attributed to Kirk. Now, the source moves to explore how this rhetoric translated into influence.
The mechanics of it.
Exactly. The author delves into the methods behind Kirk's impact, describing him as more than just a speaker, but a talented marketer and even an unintelligent grifter.
Quite the labels.
Indeed. The author portrays Kirk's quest for social media virality, manipulating youth through his sham of debates, as pathetic. He's accused of toying with youthful emotions and falsely priding and puffing up young men with Nietzschean-like resentment.
That's an interesting phrase.
Can you elaborate on what the author might mean by Nietzschean-like resentment?
Sure. Well, when the author uses that term, Nietzschean-like resentment, they are likely referencing the philosophical concept of resentment, as Friedrich Nietzsche described it.
Okay.
In this context, the author suggests Kirk tapped into a profound sense of grievance, maybe envy, perceived injustice among specifically young men, a feeling of being marginalized or unfairly treated.
And instead of helping them overcome it.
Right, instead of encouraging, maybe overcoming these feelings, the author claims Kirk amplified them, falsely priding and puffing up these young men, channeling their frustration into anger against perceived enemies. It's a way for the author to argue that Kirk wasn't inspiring constructive action, but rather weaponizing a sense of victimhood and anger for his own purposes.
That definitely adds a crucial layer to the author's critique. The source further frames Kirk as a digital P.T. Barnum for the age of algorithmic nihilism.
It's evocative.
Yeah, a carnival barker and word porn artist of conservative grievance. The author's core strategy, according to the text, was simple. Outrage sells. And rage equals engagement, and engagement equals revenue. The author claims Kirk didn't develop new ideas. He developed new ways to make people angry about old ideas. That suggests a very cynical business model.
Absolutely. And the author's phrase, algorithmic nihilism, is powerful, isn't it?
Yeah.
It suggests that in the digital age, where social media algorithms prioritize engagement, virality, sometimes over substance, there's a potential breakdown of traditional values or shared truths. The author claims Kirk capitalized on this, becoming this digital P.T. Barnum, essentially a showman of outrage.
So it wasn't just ideology.
The core insight the source offers into Kirk's operation is that his inflammatory rhetoric wasn't just ideological. It was, according to the author, a calculated, profitable business model, built on engineering outrage and division.
Like he knew anger sold.
The author argues Kirk understood that anger is a powerful currency in the online world, and he expertly manipulated it for engagement and revenue, rather than, say, genuine intellectual discourse.
The author also details what they describe as Kirk's deliberate, calculated toxicity.
Okay, like what?
For example, the source claims professors weren't just labeled liberal, but Marxist indoctrinators. This led, allegedly, to professor watch lists that the author alleges made many academics fear for their lives.
That's a serious consequence described there.
And diversity programs, according to the source, were labeled anti-white racism. The author contends that Kirk didn't engage in debate. He declared war and weaponized victimhood while claiming to oppose victim culture, and created safe spaces for conservatives while mocking the very concept for any other group.
Right.
How does the author's critique of Kirk's use of free speech fit into this picture?
Well, the author's critique here is really about perceived hypocrisy and selective application.
Okay.
The source claims Kirk's advocacy for free speech and the First Amendment was highly conditional. The author states he never heard Kirk talk about hate speech or the, obligation to counter it, nor, they claim, did he support freedom for all assembly or all religious worship or the press generally, but just selected what he liked.
So using it as a tool.
The author is arguing that Kirk used the concept of free speech as a shield for his own provocative rhetoric, while simultaneously undermining the free speech rights or even the conceptual validity of safe spaces for those he disagreed with. It's presented as a strategic weaponization of a foundational principle, not a consistent philosophical stance.
And to sort of wrap up this section on Kirk's methods, the author comments on Kirk's smirk.
The smirk.
Yeah, which the author says anyone with any depth of psychological acumen would know represented his disdain for those he spoke with.
A very personal interpretation.
Very. The author also calls Kirk's version of Christianity absurd, a walking, talking blasphemy that ignored teachings of mercy, compassion, turning the other cheek, seeing empathy as just a made-up New Age term.
Those are incredibly personal and strong condemnations from the author, aren't they?
They really are.
And they underscore the author's holistic and clearly deeply negative assessment of Kirk's character and motivations as they perceive them.
So the smirk indicates...
The commentary on the smirk suggests the author perceives a fundamental contempt for his audience or, the people he debated with, revealing, in their view, an underlying insincerity.
And the comments on his faith.
And the author's dismissal of Kirk's Christianity as blasphemy is particularly potent. It challenges not just his political views, but his claimed moral and spiritual foundations. The author is basically positing that Kirk cherry-picked religious principles to suit his narrative, discarding core tenets like empathy, which the author sees as central to genuine faith.
So performative.
It's the author's way of arguing that Kirk's entire public persona was, in their view, a performative act devoid of genuine compassion or conviction.
Okay, moving to the conclusion of the source text. The author directly confronts the narrative that emerged after Kirk's death.
Right, the aftermath.
Yes, rejecting any attempts to elevate him to some kind of heroic status. The author argues against what they call a nouveau Christ or new hero narrative.
Strong phrasing again.
Very. The author labels the current grotesque and nauseating canonization of the unintelligent grifter Charlie Kirk as a land speed record for historical revisionism.
Oof. No punches pulled there.
None. The source alleges that the movement that followed his tactical playbook of deliberate polarization now seeks to wash this record clean with his own blood.
Meaning?
As if assassination could retroactively transform a merchant of division into a prophet of unity. The author calls this not just a lie, it is an insult to history and to intelligence.
The author is making a very forceful argument here, aren't they? About the dangers of historical revisionism, particularly when it's fueled by political agendas.
Seems so.
The source claims that attempts to deify Kirk after his death are cynical, calculated, designed to redeem a legacy that the author argues was built entirely on division and hate.
So the nouveau Christ language is deliberate.
Yeah, the author's use of phrases like nouveau Christ and prophet of unity are meant to highlight the perceived absurdity and manipulation in trying to recast Kirk's image post-mortem. It's an argument that his passing, far from redeeming him, is being exploited, in the author's view, to serve the very political machine he was a part of.
So in contrast to this deification, the source performs its own autopsy.
As the title suggests.
Right. Finding not a martyr, but a symptom of the political machine that spews venom and captures hearts with hate. The author argues Kirk got what he wanted, but ultimately nobody wins.
Oh, so?
Because, the author claims, his murder enables the true terrorists in government to plod on with their agenda. The source contends that Kirk lived by the sword, the rhetorical sword he so sharpened and gleefully wielded.
Implying his words had consequences.
Directly. Saying he helped create a political culture where assassination becomes almost logical, where violence becomes inevitable, where democracy becomes impossible.
That's a heavy charge.
It is. His death, the source argues, was a tragedy, but his life was no triumph. He deserves justice, not deification. And the author believes the right will make him a martyr anyway, because a martyred Kirk is far more useful than a living one.
The author's central argument here seems to be that Kirk's legacy, far from being redeemed by his death, is instead cemented as a cautionary tale.
A warning.
Exactly. The source paints his death not as an end to the cycle of division the author claims he helped create, but maybe even as an acceleration of it.
Lived by the sword.
Yeah, by stating Kirk lived by the sword and helped create a political culture where assassination becomes almost logical, the author is drawing a direct causal link, in their view, between Kirk's rhetoric and the violent outcome.
Again, the irony.
The ultimate irony, as the source points out, is that the world Kirk allegedly advocated for a world where, quote, Any old fool can roll into a Walmart and buy a 3006 with scope on sale is the very world that ultimately claimed him, according to this autopsy.
A grim conclusion.
And the author's final warning is stark. His death won't be the last, and that we are all now prisoners of the cycle he helped create.
So we've journeyed through this really powerful, certainly provocative autopsy of Charlie Kirk. We've examined this source's highly critical assessment of his public persona, the specific incendiary statements attributed to him, and the profound implications the author draws from his career and death. It's definitely a text that doesn't just present information. It profoundly challenges us, you the listener included, to think about the consequences of political rhetoric and the narratives we construct in its wake.
And the source leaves us with a potent, maybe somewhat paradoxical message in its closing lines. Right. It says, let's keep hope alive. That's the message to Charlie's hateful angels and message of keep hate alive.
Hope versus hate.
Right. This final thought from the author encourages us, perhaps, to consider the ongoing battle against the very forces of division that the source contends Kirk championed. The author, in their own way, is offering a challenge. How do we as individuals, as a society, confront and maybe dismantle the wreckage left behind by such intensely divisive rhetoric? How do we truly keep hope alive in a world where, as the author chillingly states, the bullet came home to roost? It's a call to reflect on the lasting impact of such a contentious figure, even after he's gone.
It certainly leaves you to ponder. In a world grappling with intense political polarization and its very real-world consequences, what role do we each play? Are we perpetuating or challenging these cycles of division and animosity that this author describes? Something to think about.